addicts and alcoholics, like, we're not stupid people. And so, like, there's a reason why we do this and we keep doing it. And it's because it works. And it did work for me for a while. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was all bad, because that would be a lie. And there were moments where it served me. And I had believed at the time it was helping me cope with my anxiety. I believed it was enhancing my personality. And it was helping me numb out uncomfortable feelings, whether it be loneliness, fear, or my belief that I wasn't fitting in.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Starstruck, brought to you by Aish. This is a Jewish-themed podcast where I get to interview celebrities, digital influencers, philanthropists, and other highly accomplished individuals. I'm your host, Sarah Pachter, and I'm thrilled that you're here. Now, whether you're a first-time listener or a returning listener, we just want to thank you for joining us. And if you haven't already, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this video. And of course, we want to hear from you. So if you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below. On today's episode, we have Lizzy Savetsky. She is a digital influencer and rising star who uses her platform to advocate for causes that are close to her heart, such as fighting anti-Semitism and standing up for Israel. She's also the mother of 3 gorgeous children. Lizzy Savetsky has the seemingly perfect life, but today we're going to discuss her struggle with alcoholism. Lizzy, welcome to the show. We are so excited, so honored to have you. Thank you.
It's so great to be here. I love chatting with you anytime. So hopefully today we can make a positive impact together.
Hopefully, yes. Okay. And I just want to say congratulations, because it's been just about 2 years now that you are sober. That is huge. I have such admiration for you. And it also means like we've known each other for just about that long. I remember when we met in the Bahamas, it was great to hear you speak. You're excellent. And I just can't believe it's been 2 years.
I loved coming to your classes, and I think it was such an amazing, not coincidence because we don't believe in those, but such an amazing hand of God moment that we met and that we've become friends and hopefully can continue to do some good work together.
Yes, amen. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. I'm going to just straight up say it. I do want to talk about your struggle with alcoholism today. And I kind of want to go back to the beginning. When did it all begin? And when did you really realize you had a problem?
So I think, like most hard things in life, you only see the patterns and the red flags in hindsight. For my entire life, for as long as I can remember, I had this obsession with succeeding, with being perfect, with people pleasing, with making everyone around me happy. I never wanted to disappoint anyone. I was extremely dependent on external approval for my happiness. And I would say, like in my family, making a B was like making an F. So I never made a B. I went to a very demanding college prep school, and I made straight A's. I was extremely academically successful. I was a cheerleader. I sang on a country music show. I did pageants. I always felt like I needed to fill every moment with being productive, with achieving. But I think it was more about the public perception of me than like how I actually felt inside. And so it didn't manifest with my addiction to alcohol until much later in my life. But these tendencies that I had are very characteristic, now that I know so much about my disease, of alcoholism. And so it did set me up sort of as like the prime example of somebody who would have a susceptibility to addiction.
Right. And I'm curious to know, growing up, do you think all that pressure was an internal thing, or it was really coming from something outside of you?
I think it's in my DNA. I've thought a lot about this over the past 21 months of being sober and really looking at myself and how I became this way. And I say that, you know, I I didn't become an alcoholic because of all this pressure or all of this need to be or all of this expectation on me, but because I am an alcoholic, that's how I coped.
That I didn't hear the last part. That's how it what?
That's how I coped. My
Got
my
it.
my coping with these unrealistic expectations that others had of me and that I had of myself was manifested in drinking. But that's because I believe that I was born with a susceptibility to addiction.
I see. I see what you're saying exactly. So, can you kind of give us the rundown or the progression of how your drinking started, how
Yeah.
that coping mechanism started, and then the moment you realized this is a problem?
There were a lot of different moments throughout my drinking history where I could see that I was using it um, in ways that were not healthy. I started drinking. I had my first drink when I was, I think, 13 or 14 years old. And I want to just say, I grew up in a house with parents who never drank ever. And it wasn't because they had an alcohol problem, it was just because that was not what they did. Both of my parents are pretty control freak type people. So they didn't like this idea of drinking something or taking something that would take them out of control versus me who like loves feeling out of control, like loves escaping my mind. So I never thought that I could become an alcoholic because I didn't know that there were any in my family. I did come to find out later that I had ancestors who were bootleggers in Europe. So it does make sense, I guess. It's in there somewhere.
Right.
Uh, but I had my first drink with my best friend and my cousin. They were over, and I was just curious. I thought that alcohol seemed like something that was off limits and seemed like very adult, and I was very curious. I always looked very young until like when I was 13 years old. People would be asking me if I was like 7 or 8.
Oh.
And so I think I wanted to be more mature and I wanted to be older and I wanted to be one of the cool girls. I wanted to be liked by guys. And I think, I was insecure. And I always had a ton of friends, but there was always like a insecurity there. I never really felt like comfortable in my own skin. So, so I liked the idea of like doing something that seemed naughty and that seemed adult. And so we drank. And I remember we mixed the Jack Daniels with apple juice so that like if anyone woke up, it was like the same color and whatever. And it wasn't like any aha moment. I just liked the idea that I did this thing more than I actually enjoyed the feeling of drinking. It was like this romanticized fantasy of alcohol.
The
And
idea of it was more enticing than actually doing it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And throughout my life, I've had this rebellious streak. I'm still like this. Like I have issues with authority. I love like controversy. I like creating a stir. I mean, it's part of what makes me a good activist and, an outspoken person, but it definitely can go either way. And so I didn't really drink um, to excess in high school. There were a couple moments where I did. I remember like my senior year, there was this guy that I liked, and he had like kind of led me on, and then started ignoring me. We happened to be at the same party, so my solution for him ignoring me was to take 17 shots of whiskey. Um,
Wow.
which, isn't normal. And I definitely probably had alcohol poisoning. I did not end up in the hospital, but I mean, so it's moments like that where I can look back and I can see my unhealthy use of alcohol. And I don't think that everyone who does things like that is an alcoholic. I think that a lot of people make bad choices with alcohol, but are still able to drink like a normal person. I wasn't able to do that.
Mhm.
And then when I got to college, I didn't and the thing is, throughout my drinking, I was always very high functioning. I still maintained very strong academic success. I made sure that from the outside that people wouldn't know that I was a mess if I was. Um, but I did have some awakenings in college where I did things that were very poor judgment, and realize, like, put myself in dangerous situations, whether it be with guys, going to places that weren't safe at times of day or night, that weren't safe. Not remembering the full picture of what happened. But it wasn't like a regular occurrence to wake me up enough to say, like, you have a problem. And I think that part of the problem with being a high functioning addict or alcoholic is, like, it you can just keep going like that for so long, and it's really dangerous. Whereas, like, if you're falling apart and you're a mess, it people are more likely to try to tell you that, and then maybe it will awaken something in you. I don't know. This is just my journey.
Right.
So yeah, and so my drinking really took off when I got to the year after college, and we spoke about this in the article. The year
Yeah.
after college, I went to Israel to study at Neve, and it was a really impulsive decision, and I am a very impulsive person. And so I think I, like, landed in Israel, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what did I just get myself into? I'm in a foreign country. I have no life plan. I have no friends here, and I don't know if I even want to become religious. Like, I don't know if I like this whole environment. um, just a lot of fear, um, and loneliness. So I had my first drink that day, when I got to Israel. I found a girl who was sitting outside, on the Neve campus. It's a beautiful campus, and she looked kind of like somebody that I would be friends with. She was wearing, like, a Ramones band T-shirt. Um, she didn't look like the stereotype of what I thought I would meet on Neve's campus, and so I was immediately drawn to her. And I told her I was freaking out, and she told me that she had a bottle of Perfect vodka, which is like a cheap Israeli vodka, which is disgusting, in her room. And I said, oh, I have a bottle of Coke Zero in my room. And so we just started drinking. And that day was the first day that I could tell you I started drinking every single day after that.
Wow.
And I pretty much drank every day, minus during pregnancy, until I stopped drinking.
I see what you're saying. I do want to zone in on something that you mentioned. I'm hearing from what you're talking about that anytime you felt lonely, anytime you felt afraid, whether it was that high school boyfriend or a year abroad where you didn't know anyone, you mentioned that it was the solution. And I think that's interesting that you kind of looked to alcohol as the solution to your problems until it became the problem, it seems. I don't know if that's accurate in me saying that.
100%. Yeah, I always say it was the solution until it became the problem. And
Yeah.
it
And then,
did work.
yeah, go ahead.
Addicts and alcoholics, like, we're not stupid people. And so, like, there's a reason why we do this and we keep doing it. And it's because it works. And it did work for me for a while. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was all bad, because that would be a lie. And there were moments where it served me. And Um, I had believed at the time it was helping me cope with my anxiety. I believed it was enhancing my personality. And it was helping me numb out uncomfortable feelings, whether it be loneliness, fear, or my belief that I wasn't fitting in.
Right. Let's pause for just 1 second and go back to what you were talking about in Israel with neve. Can you define for everyone what neve is?
Neve is a seminary in Jerusalem, and it is in a neighborhood called Harnof. It's a Haredi neighborhood, and it is primarily catered towards Baal Teshuva, or people looking to become Baal Teshuva, like non-religious. But there are some parts of Neve that I believe people who grew up religious even are, you know, have take classes there. And it's basically like this haven for women from all over the world, from the ages of 19 on through 50s, um, maybe even older, that they just come and they enroll in this learning program, and there's dorms and you live there and you really immerse yourself um, in becoming religious, if that's what you're seeking.
Okay, and then just to define, I'll just do it really quickly to define a Baal Teshuva is someone who is kind of returning to their faith, meaning they may not be religious, but they're interested in becoming religious and perhaps eventually do become more observant. So thank you. Sorry to stop you to go
Oh no,
back to that,
whenever you know
but
what we're
I
talking
just
about,
wanted to
that's
define
fine.
all the terms for everyone listening. So you're in this place called Neve, which is a place for women to learn about Judaism, and you have your first drink that is the beginning of everyday drinking.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, that felt like the turning point. What happens next? How does it spin so out of control that you realize you got to do something about it?
So, as we mentioned, for me, it was the solution for a while. And I didn't have life responsibilities. All I had to do was show up to class, which I didn't always do on time.
Okay.
But I can't necessarily blame the alcohol on that.
Right. I was
There
going to
are
say, it
plenty of
doesn't have to
girls.
be the alcohol, right?
There are plenty of girls who weren't drinking who were late to class.
Yeah.
But I think, I had like no accountability. I didn't have a family. I didn't have anyone there really, to notice what I was doing to myself. Um, and I remember my rabbi, I've never talked about this. My rabbi from NYU brought a group of college kids to Israel on a trip with Maor. It's a Jewish outreach organization on college campuses. And I saw him, and he said, I told him that I'd become friends with this girl, and that, I was freaking out and I was drinking every day. He said, Lizzy, the solution isn't to become an alcoholic. And it was so foreshadowing, because I would thought at the time, like, I'm not an alcoholic. But obviously, like, the fact that I remember that all these years later, because this was in 2008, means that, there was something in me that did believe that that is what I was turning into. And then I left Israel, and I got engaged to my now husband and moved to Philadelphia, where he was in med school and I started grad school. And I just felt really, again, out of my comfort zone. I felt like lost. And um, I had told this story, but I'll reshare it because it's something that really shows you how obsessed I was with drinking. But I was in my apartment in Philadelphia. My husband and I were engaged at the time, so we weren't living together. And so I was alone. And somebody had brought over a bottle of wine for Shabbos, and it wasn't open, and it was the only alcohol that I had in the apartment. And I didn't have a wine opener because I had just moved in. And I just couldn't stand being in the moment, being still with my feelings and with my thoughts, alone in this apartment in Philadelphia, in a new city, and it's starting a new school program that I didn't really want to do. And I needed to get into that bottle of wine. And it must have been very late because I couldn't go out and buy anything. and I took a kitchen knife and I like broke the cork into the bottle, so I could drink it. And I remember I was drinking the wine with the cork like pieces, and I didn't care, you know, and it was bad wine, but I didn't care because I wasn't drinking it to enjoy it. And so I thought that even in that moment, that was not normal behavior. Like I knew that was not okay, but
Right.
I also didn't
So that
really care.
so that moment where you were kind of attacking the wine, you knew something wasn't right, but you didn't care either. It just you had to have it.
Yeah. It was like my obsession was so much greater than any sort of rational thinking. Um, and like I said, you know, it wasn't something I was going to go talk about. It's a very shameful thing. And I felt shame even in that moment alone. Um, and, you know, I was very lonely in Philadelphia, and I drank. Wine kept me company, or liquor, or whatever it was became my best friend. Like I knew that if I was going home, if I was going to be by myself, which I was for many, many, many years, because after Philadelphia, we moved to New York, where my husband was in residency, and as in surgical residency, you're at the hospital. You live at the hospital essentially. I mean, they call it residency for a reason. And I was alone all the time. I I thought, you know, maybe if I got pregnant and had a baby, that I wouldn't feel so lonely. I struggled to get pregnant. I had a lot of issues with infertility, so there was more shame around that. So of course, my solution for that was to drink more. Um, and that was a very dark period for me because I was working, and I couldn't get pregnant, and I never saw my husband. And so I started to go out a lot. I was back in my old stomping grounds of New York City, where I had done a lot of things. And drugs are a part of my story too. I haven't really spoken about that um, too much, but you know, I had struggles with that in college, and I knew that New York could be a dangerous place for me because it's where my demons were really allowed to just kind of fly free, and it's where all of my party partners were. So
Right.
it was no longer just me on the couch, you know, it was me like out in New York.
Now
Um,
it had a space to manifest itself, basically.
exactly.
Yeah. I
And
do want to kind of go back
yeah,
to two things that you mentioned. You talked about this intense shame that you felt even when you were just alone with yourself. And I find it so interesting because a lot of us view shame as something that we experience in front of other people. But it's almost like you were saying that the shame had really nothing to do with anyone else. It was this internal feeling. Maybe would you say that that is this demon that you speak about? Like what when you say you have these demons, like what does that really mean?
you know, it's like there's this like little devil that lives inside of me that like sometimes I want to feed it. Like sometimes I like that devil, and like sometimes I like my like shame. Sometimes I like want to be that like naughty, like rebellious girl, and I think I've always had that in me. And then that feeling after I do whatever naughty behavior I do always leads to the shame.
I
It's a
see.
vicious cycle. And
So it's
then,
really an internal struggle that is regardless of if anyone is watching you or not.
yeah, I actually have a name for it. I call it a dueling duality.
Oh, brilliant.
There's like the devil and the angel, and they're always at war, you
Right.
know, in here.
Well, we know that the Torah, our primary Jewish text, really talks about that as the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, or the evil inclination or the good inclination. And you said it so perfectly. It's like this dual dwelling inside of you, and that's inside of all of us. I think it's. I don't think anybody has an exception to that. I did want to, if you're willing to, and you certainly don't have to if it's too personal for the podcast or whatever, but are you willing to talk about some of your activity with drugs, or should we kind of skip past it and we can either edit it out or just move right along?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can talk a little bit about it, with the hope that maybe it could help somebody. Um, but yeah, I got into drugs in college in New York, um, and I won't
And
necessarily. What were you
this
gonna
is
say?
post engagement or during engagement? Sorry.
Oh, in college. This is when I
Pre.
was. Yeah, when I
Okay.
was. Yeah, so I knew that I knew that I had addictive tendencies before my alcoholism became the overarching story. Because I had had addictive experiences with drugs where I had struggled, and I I had smoked pot in high school and whatever, but it was never really my thing. But I um, okay, I'll just talk about it, and then if we want to edit it out.
Sure.
Okay. But I found cocaine when I was in my junior year of college, and I loved it because for a perfectionist personality, it's like you're completely in control. You have so much confidence, and you can drink as much as you want without feeling out of control. And I loved it so much. And then the problem is it's extremely addictive
Right.
um, and obviously very dangerous. And I have to say I am so lucky, and I thank God every single day that I had my struggles at the time that I did, and not today when things are laced with fentanyl, because I could easily have been dead. I mean, I
Right.
could have been dead anyway, but
Right.
it's so dangerous today, and it's really, I'm very, I am alive by the grace of God because of the time that I was in, because of the blessings that God bestowed upon me, that, I would be able to live through all of this. Um, but I was able to stop doing drugs. And so I thought that because I was able to stop that, I would be able to stop drinking.
Right. And it's almost like alcoholism, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems as if alcohol was maybe in your mind a better solution than doing hardcore
Well,
drugs.
of course, because
Right.
alcohol is legal and everyone drinks, and it's totally socially acceptable. But doing hard drugs is like dirty and disgusting and illegal, and um, but yeah, my parents ended up catching me, um, and they were not like in denial or going to let it slide at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I begged to stay at NYU. My best friend knew, Ira knew we were involved with each other at the time. My therapist knew. And so I made sure that my parents knew that I had and all of these people knew that I wanted to stop. And so I convinced my parents to let me stay at school, and they like were random drug testing me like every other week or whatever it was. And that was really humiliating.
Right. Of course.
So that woke me up enough. And then when I left, and then I graduated, and I went, and you know what was funny? I was able to stop doing drugs because I got so invested in my Judaism. I was on this journey where I was seeking meaning, and I knew that in some way I was trying to fill this God-sized hole that I had with these substances and with my party life and with all these external things, and it wasn't working. And so I got involved in this learning fellowship, and I really just like threw myself into it. And I even we had a graduation like 2 days before my graduation from NYU, and I spoke about it, and I said, that getting involved with my Jewish identity really saved my life. And it's true to this day that like the only solution for me in living a sober life is to have God in it. Um, I just also needed more structure and more of a program in order to not conquer, but in order to cope with my alcoholism. Um, and so, it's interesting that God was enough to get me off the drugs, but not to get me out of the bottle.
Right. But I do recall, speaking to you when we had our first interview over the phone and we did that article write up, you did mention how now you feel closer to God than you ever have before. And now God is so much more involved in your day to day in terms of daily praying. And, do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the reason why I can only speak for myself, so I'm not going to say
Sure.
alcoholics or addicts, but the reason why I wanted to escape was because I couldn't feel this emptiness and this void that I had, which for me is a spiritual malady. Um, it's I was soul sick, and so when people hear about coping with addiction, I think as a whole, as the public, we don't understand that it's so much more than just quitting the substance, because that's really just the symptom. The
Right.
substance is just the symptom. The actual problem comes from deep inside of me and my soul. And the only way for me to feel whole is to invite God into my daily life, into every moment, and to understand that I can't control anyone else or anything that's going to happen. Um, I can only control my own reaction to whatever's happening. Um, and so being able to feel God's presence and know that no matter what happens, that I'm on the exact path that He wants me to be on. He or she, I don't want to offend anyone, wants me to be on, is so it's such a relief, because it's like I think I spent so many years. I mean, I remember lying in bed in like the second grade, just obsessing and obsessing over so many, driving myself nuts over things that were just totally out of my hands, living in so much self-centered fear. What are they going to think of me? Um, what if there's a fire that burns my house down? Um, I'm not good enough. I it's just all these dark, fearful thoughts um, that that were so painful for me. And instead of having those thoughts, I can just say, like, God made me exactly how I'm supposed to be, with all of my flaws. He also gave me the tools to be able to live with them and to work with them, and ultimately, help other people because of them. Um,
Right.
and just like that ability to really surrender, it made me so much more spiritual. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm so much more gentle with myself, um, because, I'm God's creation, and like, I don't need to hate myself. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
No,
Like,
of
I don't
course.
need
Of
to,
course.
to feel um, like I'm not enough, because I was made exactly how I'm supposed to be. And
Right.
I don't, it's a slap in the face to God for me to hate on myself and to
Right.
hurt myself.
Right, because you are a creation of God for sure. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you felt this spiritual void, and of course, didn't want to speak for all people who are addicted, but you felt like for you there was this really big spiritual gap or void. And it's funny because I don't know if you've heard of Rabbi Twersky.
I have. I've
Yeah,
heard
so
it.
he is a major psychologist who has helped thousands and thousands of people. I mean, he has passed, but he helped thousands of people overcome their addictions. And he talked about something called spiritual deficiency syndrome, and he wasn't really relating it to alcoholics, but he was saying essentially that for all of us, when we feel sadness, when we feel loneliness, when we have these really hard feelings, it's typically because there is some sort of spiritual deficiency that we're lacking in. And if we can connect, it can really help to fill that void. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and I agree with it. Another thing I wanted to bring up that you had mentioned, because you talked about how alcohol was the solution until it became the problem, but you also said something really interesting in a previous interview with me. You said there was nothing about society that was going to make you feel like an alcoholic. The outside wasn't going to tell you you had a problem. It really had to come from within. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So everywhere that we go in our country or in the world, really, there's access to alcohol, and it's socially acceptable to drink. In New York City, just about any time of day, you'll see moms having breakfast cocktails, and nobody, you could drink all day and nobody would ever say, um, do you have a problem? They would just be like, live your best life, mom juice. There's this culture where it's it's become so normal to want to escape our the day-to-day stressors, and to use the day-to-day stressors as an excuse to drink. um, I deserve this because I worked so hard, or because my kids drove me crazy. um, and even in the Jewish world, there's so much alcohol in the Orthodox world. And I don't blame society or the Jewish world for my addiction. I don't think anyone should blame the access to alcohol on their addiction. I think I probably would have found alcohol wherever I was because I
Right.
wanted it and I was good at finding it. But it was never really something that people thought twice about. My last blackout started in the synagogue on a Shabbos morning at Kiddush Club. I was always the only girl drinking with the guys during Kiddush Club, and I was so proud of myself because I could drink them all under the table. Um, and everyone thought it was so cute that I would drink with the men during the Haftarah. So yeah, I mean, it seems like we live in a culture where drinking to excess is the norm.
Right. Can you mentioned that you blacked out. Can you kind of describe that scene? I remember you telling me you were actually hosting guests that week.
Yeah.
Can you tell us again about that?
So I was already wanting to stop drinking at this point. I had already um, made the decision that it was something I wanted to do. And I was living in this misery of wanting to stop and not being able to, and having to accept the fact that I was completely powerless over my disease and over my addiction. Um, and so I was in a very shady time period where I was hiding my drinking, and lying about it to everyone, and doing a pretty damn good job.
No,
um,
it's not a joke, because I don't know how you were able to hide all of that. You're
yeah,
right. It's not easy.
yeah, I was really good at it. I had a lot of tricks. And so I had one embarrassing experience that I'll share before my last drink. And that was maybe like a month um, before I had officially decided. I, um, it was during the 2021 conflict in Gaza and the spring of 2021. And I was freaking out because I was um, putting myself out there to stand up for Israel, and just getting attacked every day on social media. I was putting so much pressure on myself, as if it's like such alcoholic behavior. Like, I am the only person that can save the world and that can save the Jewish people. It's like, calm down, Lizzy, you're not that important. But that's the kind of pressure that I would put on myself. Like, I have to do this because I'm the only one standing up and I'm the only voice. And like, it's just intense self-imposed pressure. And so I was drinking a lot to cope with that. And I was doing a live with the Israeli consulate in New York. And I was on Instagram. There were like thousands of people watching, and I was so drunk that I knew that I was not. I knew that I was not in my right mind, and so I asked Ira, my husband, to come on with me and sit with me and do the interview with me. And I had taken a bunch of Adderall, which was part of the end of my story. I started abusing Adderall because it helped me to drink more and feel like I was in control and function. But it also murdered my personality and made me a very angry wife and mother.
Right.
And so I had taken a bunch of Adderall, and it had made my mouth very dry. And so the entire interview, instead of slurring my speech like a drunk, I looked just like a cracked out person. I'm like, kept making different motions with my mouth because my mouth was super dry. And I like couldn't speak in the way that I normally would. And so when it was over, Ira said, "What the heck is wrong with you? Like, that, what was that?" And then people were talking about it, and it was like the buzz. And I was mortified. Mortified. It was like, all I've ever wanted to do is make a difference in the world and use my influence to have a positive impact. And like, here I am just making a complete fool out of myself because I can't get in control of my disease. And I was like watching it happen from above almost. Like, here I am, like finally living my dream, but there's this like thing that I just can't seem to get a grip on. And so after that, I really wanted to stop. But I wasn't able to just put it down and stop overnight. Like, for me, it really was a process. And I didn't understand that at the time, and my family didn't understand that at the time. Like, if you want to stop, just stop. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So there was like a month-long period of me trying to control it, not being able to control it, and then really wanting to quit and just like being under this like really strong hold of this thing. So I had like called around to try to get into a rehab, and there were no beds available. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to take myself to like a 12-step program. And I had already gone to a few meetings before my final blackout, and I already had like people's numbers, other alcoholics that I could call, that I was leaning on for support. But when I walked to the synagogue that last day, it was July 31st, 2021, I was pushing the stroller, and I knew that when I got there, I was going to drink. There was no question in my mind. I was a woman on a mission. I was going to drink. Nobody was going to know. I was going to hide it. It was going to be my final drink. I had so many final drinks. We'll just say that. And then, unfortunately, I wasn't able to hide it that day. And I was hosting company, even had like a guest from out of town who I didn't know. And he's like meeting my family for the first time. And I am like on a different planet. And I was lucky that the other guests were two of my best friends who knew that I was struggling. And so I didn't, I felt comfortable enough after the fact. It wasn't like I felt like I needed to go do damage control. They knew I was struggling, and they had a lot of love and grace with me, and I'll be eternally grateful forever for that. But I I remember I was blacked out, and my friend took me in the bathroom. I only know this because she told me. And I told her, I said, I really want to quit. I'm trying to quit and it's not working. I'm doing everything I can and I'm just never going to be able to get over this. I'm just going to be like an alcoholic mess for the rest of my life. And my friend said to me, she said, Lizzy, if you wanted to grow your hair out, you wouldn't wake up tomorrow with long hair. And I thought that was like the nicest thing. She was so
Yeah.
gentle with me.
Yeah.
Um,
And so understanding and so real about what the process really is. And so she was so real and about the process and what it really involves.
I
So
was,
Lizzy,
yeah,
yeah,
lucky not to have people who were judgmental, like in my sphere in that moment.
yeah. I do want to go back to one thing you mentioned that your husband said when he, after that Instagram live, when he said, "What's wrong with you?" I do want to just in his defense, and I know that you obviously feel this way as well, but he's been so supportive. I just want to let the viewer know that about your husband as he's incredibly supportive of you and has been
What?
amazing. I
Yeah.
don't want
I
anyone to think,
Let me
yeah,
just talk about that for a minute.
sure.
So, being married to an addict or an alcoholic is extremely hard because it takes over the family. It becomes a family disease. And so, Ira had dealt with my disease, active disease, for years. And he wasn't able to understand because he doesn't have the same kind of brain that I have, why I couldn't just stop. But it was really impacting our family in a negative way. Um, and, we have 3 kids. And he loves me so much. And he, thank God, has been able to forgive me. I took a lot of time making my amends to him. Um, he knows that I am living my apology every single day with my commitment to my recovery. Um, but in that time, he didn't know what to do, and there was nothing that he could do because nothing that he could say or do would make me get better. I
Of
had to
course.
do that.
Of course, it had to be internal, which actually leads me to the next question, and we'll wrap it up after that. But, you said, thank God he forgave you. But the question I want to ask you is, Lizzy, have you forgiven yourself?
I am at peace with my journey. I absolutely am. I really don't have any regrets about the past. I feel lucky that God had so much grace with me and allowed me to live through so many dangerous situations. Um, and I believe that I was meant to have every single one of those moments. Um, Maybe it's so that I could help somebody else. Maybe it was to prepare me, and, you know, maybe overcoming the hardest challenge that I've ever had, which for sure I've been through really hard things in my life. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe like it it's only made me stronger in every other aspect of my life, working at this every day. Um, and I believe that God made me exactly how I was supposed to be. And, um, I hope that I'm living a life that makes him proud.
Yes. And I really do believe listening to you that sharing your story, being vulnerable with the world can really, really help the listener. I'm sure there are people out there struggling with the same thing and you're able to help them. So I do want to wrap it up with one last question, Lizzy. What advice do you have for others who are in the throes of addiction?
I always say that you're worth it and your life is worth it. And if there's something inside of you that even a fleeting, tiny spark of desperation to make a change, you have to seize it because it will pass you by. And you're the only person who can save your own life. Um, and don't do it for anyone else, but do it for yourself. because you were put here for a reason. And my favorite people in the world are sober alcoholics and addicts because we really have something so unique and special. We have a drive like nobody's business. And when it's put towards positive things, the world just opens up and you can really do such incredible work. And, you're just blocking your gifts when you're numbing out. And you're worth so much more than that.
Wow. So you're really basically, you are worth it, is what you're telling anyone who is struggling and wants to try to
Yeah.
change.
And the opposite of addiction is connection. And I really believe that you cannot cure yourself. Not that I don't actually believe you can ever cure yourself. I believe it's a daily battle that I fight and that we all fight. But you cannot, I don't believe that you can um, get better without connection with others and connection with God. And so reach out for help. There are so many resources out there. Just make a call, show up to a 12-step meeting. There's 12-step meetings online now. You can just hop on a Zoom. It's as simple as that. And just take the first step.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It was such an honor for me to speak with you. And I always love talking to you, whether it's in person, on the phone, over StreamYard. So thank you so much, Lizzy. We're really, really grateful.
Thank you so much. And, the only reason I did this is to hopefully help someone. And I so appreciate and respect your use of this platform and your voice to hopefully help people who are struggling.
Thank you. And Lizzy, I do want to ask you, how can people learn more about you? Where can they find you? Tell us.
You can follow me on Instagram at Lizzy Savetsky, LIZZY SAVETSKY. And basically, anything exciting I'm doing, you'll see over there.
Great. And also, if you want to learn more about Lizzy Savetsky, check out the 3 articles I wrote about her on Aish.com, which is linked in the episode description. You can find this podcast on your favorite podcasting platform and on Aish.com's YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Aish.com for more content like this. And by the way, if you like what you see and you like what you're hearing, don't be shy. We want to hear from you, so leave a comment below. Thanks again, and I will see you next week.